Kill Crab is an FPS game made in Unreal Engine by a team of students under the name Tumbleweed Games. It's a small team with 8 names in the credits, though the Steam page states it was a team of 5 that had 5 months to put the game together. It's a Western-style underwater shooter that eases you in with a good tutorial, listing off your controls clearly and giving you set areas to use them. The tutorial is guided by a Western fish sheriff, though his voice is quite quiet on the default sound settings, so I had to give him a boost to be able to hear him over the music. Your movement is quite sluggish, though this does give a good underwater feel and gives the appearance of trying to trudge around with resistance. The tutorial focuses on basic movement first. Your jump is quite long and has a long hang time to simulate floating in the water, which is great for that authentic feel alongside the walk. You can also double jump, and you have an ability to grip edges and pull yourself up if you don't quite reach. This isn't a very reliable ability to activate, however. You get a prompt and have to press space again when it comes up to do the pull, but the prompt can flash up in a split second and not detect, so you have to try again. It's also a bit of a clunky movement, because you basically morph toward the wall and slide up it like a lethargic walrus, and there's no animation with the hands to match what you're doing. It moves on to weapons. You have a trident for melee, and in a chest you find a pistol. It makes you practice on a firing range. It's got a good fire rate, and again, to simulate that underwater feel, there's a bit of lag between firing and the shot landing, and you get a bubble trail to help you trace where it's fired. You also have an ability to slow time with right click, which lasts for about 4 seconds and takes double the time to recharge. You get your first bit of story here. The sheriff tells you that his evil fish brother has summoned crabs to take over the town, and that he needs you, a random diver, to beat his crab army enough that he gets mad and is drawn out so that you can beat him as well. Moving on, the 3 icons on the side are your chargers for the other movement abilities, which you get next. Shift is a sprint ability, which toggles on for 4 seconds and then stops. It reloads quickly, so if you want to sort of continuously sprint, you have to keep tapping it. Control when you're off the ground is for a ground slam, which is a bit underwhelming in delivery because the impact is very blunted. You kind of just land on the ground like you normally would, with a tuft of smoke coming out when you hit the floor. It's hard to appreciate the impact of this skill in the tutorial, but it's got a 4-second recharge, so it's pretty quick. If you're already on the floor, control is for a short dash ability, which is a 3-second recharge. I had a good feeling coming out of the tutorial. Sure, there were a couple of iffy animations and the wall grip wasn't seeming reliable, but I always expect rust with student projects. The overall world building was promising, and the dedication to the authenticity of the game premise was encouraging going into it. The mechanics seemed sound with their tweaks for the environment and fairly standard to help combat maneuverability. Transitioning to the main level, there was a card telling me a funny joke about how instead of crab lifespans being 3 to 4 years like in real life, they're only 3 seconds in this game. Unfortunately, this became less amusing when I too also ended up having a 3-second lifespan, because this game has no concept of personal space or pacing. You get dropped on an anchor into a central area with signs pointing to the 3 arenas that you need to go into to defeat enemies to draw out the big boss enemy. They're not in a set order, theoretically, but there's a station, a camp, and a mine, and if you try to go to the mine first, you'll get barred out. Hello, Editor Rover here. I think this barrier is actually to trap you inside of the arena once it activates so that you can't leave. If you hear the doo-doo audio cue in the background, you'll hear that when I enter the other arenas and they activate. Because I backed out as soon as I heard the cue in the clip, I didn't properly enter it, so I think it caused me to get stuck outside. As soon as you arrive in any of these 3 areas, the game spawns an overwhelming amount of enemies at point-blank range. The entire combat experience of this game is sheer backpedaling panic, where you just try to run away from the onslaught and not die, only for the game to spawn more things directly behind you, or in front, or at range in front waiting for you to get there. The idea, which is not really explained properly, is that you kill a number of enemies specified by the skull icon in the corner in each arena. Once you do that, the rest all die and despawn, and you're left to breathe finally. But from the sound of the tutorial, you're asked to effectively clear out the areas to get rid of all the enemies, implying that the more you kill, the less are left to deal with. You can imagine the stress it caused to find out that for every enemy I killed, 7 more spawned half a foot away from me. I had to wonder how on earth I was ever going to get rid of them all. The arenas seem small initially, but do open up into bigger areas. There are ammo and health boxes around for you to refill, but even if you try to run for these during the onslaught, you might find an enemy spawn inside or on top of the box that you want, which makes it much harder to get without immediately taking damage. The sprint helps your movement, but the enemies spawn and move so fast that you can't really get a head start on them. The dash can take you through some enemies, but more are usually waiting, and the slam doesn't seem to do anything more than push them back. Also, despite most of the topic being about crabs, you get dive bombed by pufferfish through all of this, which is just too much to focus on. Some crabs also launch rocks at you from range, which stunts your jump distance and again deals damage. This for me is just too much at the same time. It felt like they wanted to spawn the enemies inside of me, but just didn't know how, so settled for spawning them an inch behind me, making me swivel constantly to figure out where the damage was coming from. There was no real ability to apply strategy or skill, because my entire focus was just mashing left mouse and trying to get away from them. The safest place in relation to the crabs was upward, which worked somewhat, but of course the pufferfish would then just slam into me and explode. Sure, it makes for fast-paced action, which some people might enjoy, but I prefer to have to earn my victory in combat with proper use of the mechanics rather than just smashing jump constantly to try and escape, and hitting left mouse like my life depended on it. The only skill that really helps all that much in the arenas is the slow time. It's the one skill that, combined with the sprint, actually allows you to make headway on the crabs and find some clear ground long enough to think. I forgot it existed initially because of the shock of the onslaught, but later found that it worked well to actually give time to breathe, select appropriate weapons, use the environment features like explosive barrels, and use the ground slam to my advantage. But that experience shouldn't have been unique to slow time. That should be a capability at all times in combat for me. Either they should have increased the spawn distance to give you a bit of reaction time and slightly slowed the pace of the enemies, or spawned maybe 10 to 20 more enemies than you needed to kill in the arena to give you that sense of overwhelm, but still make it more manageable to keep some distance and avoid taking damage. After each area you gain a new weapon to help you in the next area. In the camp you get an extra pistol, in the station you get a harpoon gun, and after the mines you get a cannon. The harpoon gun has a pierce shot ability where it can kill multiple enemies at once, which is great to get through the kill number faster, but not to save you if you're dying, because being able to harpoon 3 out of 50 enemies doesn't make that much of an impact. The harpoon gun's reload time is also much longer than the other two, which means that when you're out of ammo you have to press left mouse or R to reload almost straight away to get much use out of it a second time. The cannon is slow but powerful, but it at least has 2 shots before a reload, so you can get a bit more out of it. The other thing I got at the end of each area was a crash. That's right, the system failed on me twice. I beat the station first, went to the camp, and the second everything spawned, the game dropped out. Started again, did the station and the camp, got to the mine, fought a little bit, died, and then the game crashed again. So then I played it all through from start to finish. It seemed like for every new area I had to earn it by surviving a crash and replaying from the start. The 3 arenas are all connected to a central level and there's no save, so if you lose things, that's it. The good news is the game only takes about 20 minutes to beat, so you don't have to lose too much time with your progress. It's obviously not ideal though to have to repeat gameplay over again. The final boss is much of the same as the arenas. Crabs spawn everywhere, but instead of being dive bombed by pufferfish, you get hailed from above by rocks that have such a large spread that if you manage to get trapped in a corner, you're probably going to die. Because the boss is miles above you, your focus is upward, but you can't stand still for long because of the crab swarm, and trying to run around is more of a blind act of faith. This means it's more likely that you end up somewhere inconvenient, and once you're hemmed in, the crabs spawn in front of you and you get smacked down by boulder rain. It's not a bad boss per se, you do have to use the movement mechanics to keep yourself out of damage from the endless crab waves and the boss's rocks. Because it's so far away, it's hard to actually hit, and of course the stomp ability becomes quite irrelevant against the final boss. I leant on the cannon as a weapon mostly, and just had to fire towards the boss when I had a chance and hoped it would register as damage. But I did it in the end. One other flaw I noticed is that if you die, you lose all of your stored up ammo. This game has no ammo cap, so before the boss I ran around stocking up a load of ammunition from the crates in the areas, but I died once and respawned with bare minimum ammo, which is kind of annoying to work around. There are crates in the boss arena, but doing laps to build your ammo up just increases your chance of taking damage. There were complaints also that the walk speed was too slow, which I would agree with after having to play it 3 times. In the dead time between arenas where you restock health and ammo and transit to the next one, the map is wide enough that the walk speed feels pretty painful. It feels right in the tutorial and as said does match the tone, but with the need to run so much in the arenas and the spread between, you spend most of the time just tapping sprint and dashing. I'd be willing to sacrifice the detail of water walking feel for it being more effective in its application. Saying all that though, the game redeems itself with its world building, art and sound. It's bright, colourful, well designed with the arenas, and there are lots of great details to lean into the theme, like starfish on your pistol, the shot delay and walk delay, and nice muffled step sound effects. The only comment I would make on the application of the visuals is that there is a bit of clipping with your weapons, whether it's the gun or the trident, when you get too close to environmental objects. Other than that, the visuals are very good. The narrator's voice acting is good for the tone when you turn his volume up, and the music fits with the theme. The music in the tutorial, however, seems to be from the game Risk, which was a weird happenstance. Overall, it's a good effort, with lots of care and detail into the visual and feel, but has some fallbacks in the delivery. The crashes, of course, aren't ideal, since you have to restart the game. The combat is the same in each of the arenas, which is fine, but the pace is too quick with too little time to react, and it doesn't allow the time to properly use the mechanics and weapons given to you without leaning super hard on the slow time. It is good to have the advancement with the weapons, and the slow time is a saviour to give you a chance to get some strategy added in at points. The arenas have boosts, different levels, and good space to let you use your extended jump and keep manoeuvrable, and for the most part the movement mechanics do help, though not as much as you'd like given the range and pace of the enemies. If you want a short experience of mashing buttons without much care, you might enjoy this game, but otherwise you might find it wanting. I can't fault the effort put in, but I'd say it might have been better for that effort to be lent towards the gameplay and stability rather than the environment as much. Overall, I'll give Kill Crab a 5.5 out of 10.